Hello and welcome to episode 51 of the Your Next Chapter podcast. Thanks for spending your time here with me again today. Now, this week I'm talking to my namesake, another Angela, but this one spelt with 2 L's and a surname of Johnson. Now, Angella Johnson is often referred to as a marketing genius by her clients and her colleagues, and she's actually created the soul message archetypes approach, which you can find more about on her website. But Angela and I really felt like soulmates when we were talking. We have such a similar take on the world, this beautiful blend of strategy and soul, of marketing approach fused with intuition. And this conversation, I think you're going to find very rewarding and also reassuring. That we're talking about how, in the essence, that there isn't a need for you to follow formulas. Yes, frameworks are important. Having some sort of boundaries and parameters to work within as you build your business or as you start your business is important, but ultimately you need to then lay them aside and follow what your own heart is telling you. We're so covered in information, smothered by information these days in the age of the internet. And there's so many different, follow this, do that, paint by numbers sort of approaches. And as Angela says, frameworks help provide guidance, but formulas are so often just too dictatorial. Now, they may be the way, but is it your way? Just because it has worked for somebody else does not mean that the same approach will work perfectly well for you. So we're really looking for a blend, that ability to pause and to look inside and to find the answers that work for you. And it's really reassuring to hear such an open conversation with someone like Angela, who, by her own admission, has been to burnout and back again. She really did build that fantastic business when she did all the right things. She followed the formulas, she took on board the advice, she implemented like a crazy woman, again in her words, and she soared past that coveted, 6-figure income from her business. But in 2012, she burned out and then sort of retreated for a while to really consider the path she'd taken and to get herself ready for what I would call a next chapter. And this time she is doing it her way by very much following that intuition. Now, some of the things that we talk about is the importance of energy and how energy is everything, especially when it comes to building a business. So important to tap into what is it that invigorates you. And then asking yourself the questions and following what draws your curiosity and your heart. So look, that's just the tip of the iceberg of all the different things that Angela and I speak about on this week's episode. So I really hope that you do enjoy it. And as always, any comments, any feedback, any questions are always gratefully received. Let's dive in, shall we? Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here.
So how the next chapter started is it was through a breakdown. And I remember the day very clearly. It was 2012, probably about November. It was late winter. And everything was going great on the outside. I was at almost multiple 6 figures in my business. My events had 250 people at them. Like, anyone who was looking at my life saw that everything was going great. And I was miserable, but I could not figure out why. It didn't make any sense. And so I was very confused. But it was that morning in November, and I'm curled up in a ball, looking out my window, laying on my bed. And it was the third day in a row that I had just really not gotten out of bed, other than to use the bathroom, take care of necessities. But I had no desire to do anything. And a couple days before that, I told my husband, I said, something, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what's going on. I just don't feel like myself. I don't know, I shouldn't be upset. I shouldn't be depressed. I shouldn't be sad. Maybe it's just seasonal affective disorder, because in November in the United States, in Utah, it's cold. There's not a lot of sun. I thought maybe it's just that. And when he left that morning, My husband, Richard, he's Mr. Happy. Nothing really bothers him. Like, he's just the most loyal, kind, caring, easygoing person. Like, nothing really riles him up. And this is why we make a good couple. We're polar opposites. And he just looked at me and he said, "Sweetheart, do I need to be worried?" And that's all he said. And I can't say that without having a little bit of emotion show up, because for this person who doesn't get worried about anything, the way he looked at me and just that simple question, but I could see the absolute fear and panic on his face of what has happened to my wife. This person who hosts events and helps a lot of people, and like, what is going on? And I just saw that he had no idea what to do. And that was the moment. And I just realized I had to change everything. And I didn't know what. I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know what was going on. But that's when, really within about 48 hours, I burned my business down. I let go of my very expensive business coach. I let go of most of my clients. I let go of all the programs I was running. And so my income really went back to zero. And here I was, about $20,000 away from this magical number of 200,000 in sales. And it meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. And so that was the moment that everything changed.
Oh, and as you were saying that feeling of recalling that moment and the emotion coming up, it was a huge moment. And one thing that I picked up when you were talking there, and I think we do this to ourselves so often, is that, I shouldn't be sad. I shouldn't be unhappy. I shouldn't be depressed. All the boxes are ticked. What is wrong with me? And we make ourselves wrong for how we're feeling. But it was just a total reality. You needed to change everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In hindsight, because everything makes sense in hindsight. Now I can look back and go, oh, I know exactly what was going on. Okay. But when you're in the middle of the storm, it feels impossible. It feels hard. And it feels really scary, because I had built up this brand and built up this business, and really my ego and my identity was so wrapped up into this. And I thought, if I'm doing everything right, then why in the world am I so miserable? Why am I not happy? And, before that, it was actually the summer before that, I remember my birthday's in June, and we were having this outdoor gathering at my home, and I could not wait for people to leave. I was so annoyed that friends and family were there celebrating me, because I had work to do. Like, I had events to fill, and I had all this stuff to do. And it wasn't until after they left I realized, what am I doing? Like, that was a memory that I can never get back. What am I doing? Like, how did my life get here? But I just ignored that. It's like, no, it's fine. This is what I have to do. And I was working with a coach at the time too. Not that there's any blame here, because I totally received this. I'm 100% accountable. And I followed in these footsteps, and the advice and guidance was, Angela, you just have to work harder than you've ever worked before, for a solid 5 years at least, and then things will start paying off. And that's what I was told. And it was that, that saying of, you do what most people won't do so that you can have the life that most people won't have, which is so full of judgment, right? But at the time I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is what I have to do, because I didn't want to go back to my old life of being broke, of not making an impact. At least that was the judgment, right? And so I took that and I ran with it. And I'm really good at having this extreme all or nothing personality. There's not a whole lot of middle ground for me. And so I played that role very well. I was a very good student of following the rules for a short period of time, which is funny because I'm a rebel. I don't follow rules too well, but things usually combust or implode. And then I realize, wow, I'm not meant to be in that box.
Absolutely, and I can hear that as you're talking, that one of the things that I very much relate to, because as we were talking before we hit record, you and I are kindred spirits, because I had a very similar experience in 2012 when I also burnt my business down. Same, very similar. I'd built it since 2003, gone to serviced offices, gone and bought a real office, had real full-time staff. Yeah, all the boxes were ticked. But the point that you made about your ego and identity being so wrapped up in this, that's the danger zone, isn't it? That we can fall into. Like, who am I if I don't do this? Who am I if I'm not a business owner? Who am I if I'm not, have my own marketing agency? And there was fear there. It was killing me. I was absolutely exhausted, burnt out, much like yourself. But there was that big fear. What will people think if I throw this all away? Did that thought run into your head as well?
It did, and it was even more than that. It was like I have sacrificed my health,
Mm,
my marriage, relationships. Like I've sacrificed all of this for the business. And what if all of that wasn't necessary? And there
mm.
was so much humility that I wasn't willing to step into. I was like, what if I was wrong? Like, no, I can't be wrong because I've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to receive this coaching. I've followed all the steps. Why isn't this working out? And so there was part of me that was so angry and
Yeah.
so just like, no, I refuse to accept that this is not going to work out because I have put everything on the line. Everything. And it was that moment of like, okay, maybe like what if I let go of the need to be right? And I did what actually worked for my life. And I started listening to my intuition. Because during that time, too, and part of that burnout was I ignored my intuition completely. Like it was on the back burner. And I would ask my coach, I remember asking her, so I'm noticing that some of my clients are getting results and some aren't. And I think it's because they're running a business that's not in alignment with their purpose. And I was met with laughter of like, oh, purpose. No one's going to pay you for purpose. No one is going to pay you for intuition or spirituality. They're going to pay you for money, marketing, and messaging. Just do that. You can't afford not to. It was like, oh, okay. And it was just such a funny, when I look back going, that's a pretty abusive relationship when you really look at it, of like, no, just squash who you are. Like, don't do that. And I was willing, like I was the willing participant. So again, there's no victimization or no blame here, but it's such an interesting dynamic to see this played out of going, when did I first stop listening to myself? Because that became the norm. And it caused a breakdown to get me to wake up to there is another way to live your life and create a business.
And sometimes we have to have that experience. I mean, again, in hindsight, or as I call it, hindsight, you can look back and you go, aha, that's when intuition and I started going down separate paths. And that's when it all started to fall apart. But it's only with that hindsight that we can see that. And I really do believe in my own experience is that we have to go sometimes through that breakdown to have the breakthrough. It's just essential that we have to experience what we don't want to really then be able to flip that and identify what we do want. And you had that wake-up call. So when you decided, okay, I draw a line in the sand, it's time for me to start listening inwards instead of outwards. What did you do from there? Keep going with the story. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a blur because, at the same time of like burning down my business, I had to get my physical, spiritual, and mental self back to at least a homeostasis level, like where I could function and think clearly. Because a lot of the things that were happening in a mindset way is the fraud factor. Like I felt like a complete fraud of like, I have built this business. I coach other people to do this. How do I even move forward? Like, how do I even talk about this? And so it wasn't until I really got back that I started talking about it. People are going, oh, I so get it. And now, like, that's a really big reason why people work with me is because they can totally relate. They're either on the edge of burnout or, have recovered or trying to recover from it. So essentially what I did is I just got really slow. Like, I just slowed everything down. And before I would make a decision, whether it was an investment decision and, how I was investing my time or my dollars, I started asking questions of how does this feel? Like, can I see myself doing this 5 years from now? Because if I can't, then that means it's a no. Because my intuition was so off target. I really forgot how to listen to myself. And so it was a period of deep healing. And then just working with a handful of clients, like just building it up slowly, but making sure that those clients were in alignment, making sure that what I had really served them, because I was in this mode of just sell, bigger, more, kind of the 7-figure coaching model, which there's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't my model. And so it was constantly asking questions. But then, now that I think about it, it was a lot of healing, but also healing those relationships and restoring trust with my body, with my intuition, with my higher power, with my husband, with friends and family, because I had been absent. My marriage wasn't going so well at that point. And so going back and focusing on what mattered and paying attention to my body, like, hello, body, like I've been neglecting you for a while. And wow, the gained weight that I had, how I was feeling in my body, like it all made sense. And so it was a lot of healing, but just, I think radical accountability was part of that process. of looking at, okay, I 100% created this. And it wasn't about blaming myself or anyone else, but it was radical accountability of, okay, what else is possible? What do I choose to create now? And how do I want to feel every day? And so that's when I also got a huge aha that I'm not motivated by money. I'm motivated by how I feel and the experiences I want to have. And so shifting even my financial goals from I want a, $20,000 a month or whatever the number is going, what do I want to experience? How do I want to feel? What relationships would I like to carry forward? And when I started focusing on that and still marketing myself, like there was still, making invitations, it wasn't just only healing, then I bounced back very quickly. I built up my 6-figure business again within several months. Like I bounced back very quickly. But I took a lot more time to implement, to make decisions. And the people pleaser in me had to say no a lot more often.
That's a big one, that one of deciding what you're going to say yes to and what you're going to say no to, and being okay with the initial uncomfortability of actually saying some of those no's. When you were saying that you spoke to your coach back then about how you noticed that some of your clients weren't getting the results that others were, and you saw that was because you felt they weren't in alignment with their purpose. I mean, that totally resonates with me. I mean, that's the place that I come from as well. And I think what we're hearing here is we've got to be careful that we take on other people's definitions of success, of how we should be operating and what a successful business looks like. And, I get quite cranky about, all the gurus telling us exactly do this, and this. And then, pennies will rain from heaven. It doesn't.
Yes. If you just follow this, 6-step formula to 6 figures in 6 months, your whole life. And here's the thing is I've sold that stuff. I didn't know. In that moment, it's I remember marketing this stuff. I remember one of my first events where I had to rush to the back of the room, and I had so many people apply to this program. I created a second program, and it's on one hand, it's oh my gosh, it worked. It's so exciting. But I cannot get rid of that sinking feeling. I don't know that this is for me. And the advice from friends, colleagues, coaches, oh, Angela, you're just getting used to it. It's just a new muscle. That's why it's feeling uncomfortable. But I think that one of the most important pieces that we can really look at as individuals with our intuition is know the difference between our intuition saying something's out of alignment here versus there's resistance because you're in your own way.
And that's a really interesting question. Yeah. How do we distinguish between those? That's a big question that comes up a lot is how do I know it's my intuition talking, or is it I'm feeling this resistance? How do I move around that? I actually was away last week at a retreat with clients, and it was a topic that we had a very long conversation about. How do we keep moving through the resistance? How do I know if it's not just my fear or my self-sabotage, or if I'm really not supposed to be doing this thing? It was a fascinating question. What's your take on that? We could probably talk for an entire day about this because it's different for every person. And so some of the things that I learned, if people don't know what human design is, that's been a huge tool that I use because my human design, and I'm the kind of person where my intuition speaks to me and I immediately know. It's an immediate, and I can't quite, the second I try to make it logical or justify it or make a reason for it, but if I honor the feeling of does this feel heavy or does this feel light, and there's just an immediate knowing, then when I follow that, it works. When I try to talk myself out of it or try to put my head to it, making a logical thought other than the feeling, then that's where it gets complicated. And so I think for every single person, it's different. But I ask a lot of questions. It's really interesting when we have so many points of view of this is the right way to live life. This is the right way to build a business. This is the right way to have a sales conversation. And we get very attached to those points of view. And I find that when our intuition shows up, when we have all these points of view, it clouds the intuition. It dilutes it because that need to be right, because in our society, that's where we're rewarded. Ever since we're children in school, you have the right answer. And usually the answer comes from outside of you. So we're really not trained to have our own answers. It's either our parents, doctors, religion, you name it. And we're putting ourselves in these systems of someone else other than you has your answers. And so it makes sense that when we grow up to be adults and we're building a business and we get confused about our intuition,
like have compassion for yourself in that moment. But to answer the question, I think it varies for each person. And so to really understand the way your intuition works, like I have, people where they just have thoughts in their head and it just like it makes sense for them. For me, it's just a knowing. It's like a gut knowing of what is in alignment or out of alignment. But if I ask a question like, well, what's the best thing here? Or here's the trick question I see a lot of people get confused in is what will serve my highest good? And then they ask that question. They might even douse or muscle test or, whatever it is. But it's a trick question because everything is for your best and highest good given enough time, given enough, perspective. Like we can look back on anything going, oh, that was probably not the best decision. But you know what? Here's what I learned. Especially for those of us who are coaches. And so the question that I love to ask and to really see what my intuition is telling me versus all my points of view is if I choose this, whatever this is, what does my life and business look like in 5 years? It gets me out of the here and now. It gets me out of my attachment. And I let go of all my points of view. And I just look at the energy. I feel the energy. Does it feel expansive and light and like there's forward movement, or is there a heaviness there? And so that's where I test my intuition of going, oh, I'm really attached to the outcome here. And that's the other thing. When we're attached to the outcome, we're really good at convincing ourselves it's intuition when it's our need to be right. So there are a few possibilities in there. But like I said, we could probably talk for an entire day or more about that. It's a really big and important question.
It is. And I love the perspective that you bring to the table, which I share, which is that it is different for each person, and getting to understand what intuition feels like for you, how it turns up for you. I mean, for me, it's just a knowing. It's just that's how it is. And I also get the goosebumps, and I get the feeling of almost like time standing still just for a moment, like this feeling of deja vu. It's quite weird. Even when I say the words, it happens. It's happening now. But that for me is then I know that this is at this moment I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And I like you've actually said that before. It's never too late. You are right on time. So whatever's happening now, like letting go of that fear that it's not happening in the order that it should, or it's not happening as quickly as it should, or wherever we've got those shoulds coming in, those judgments of ourselves coming in, replacing that with the self-compassion and the curiosity. To me, feels like the most important thing. But definitely that feeling of the energy. Do I feel excited by this? And another one I think is, does it keep coming back? If it keeps coming back and knocking on the door, then I think we've got to turn around and have a good look at it.
Yes. And I love the book, Big Magic by Liz Gilbert. She talks about, with this intuition and this creative spark keeps tapping you on the shoulder, and if you keep denying it, it will eventually go away. And I think intuition works the same way. But when you have these recurring themes or this recurring feeling, it's like pay attention to that. There's something there. And the other thing that I love to ask myself is when I can just feel my head spinning around with what's the right thing and what's the decision, and I get confused with what is real for me, what's my truth. I think it comes down to, do you trust yourself? Because it's just a choice. And if you just choose whatever is in front of you, like choose yes or no, you can always change your mind. You can always say, you know what? Okay, just kidding. I'm actually going to choose this. But I think one of the things in our, the personal development world, especially, we use things like integrity and committed as a way to pressure ourselves to stick with this original choice that wasn't actually in alignment. And so we end up like executing and following through on things, and it feels hard and it's struggle the whole time. It's like, oh, I've got to be in integrity with my choice, when it's like, well, actually, being in integrity means honoring the energy. And the energy sometimes flows and it changes and it shifts. And so there's that balance of not being flaky, right? Being reliable and consistent, but honoring the energy as it changes. And so I think that self-trust is, the other question I'd love to ask is, if I trusted myself, what would I choose here? And as a business owner, especially, like I really trusted myself to make my money back on this investment, or to host an event and trust that people are going to show up because I'm going to do everything in my power to market that thing. Do I trust myself this way? Like, what would I do? What would I choose if I trusted myself? And that's also a great question, because for me, I'll just notice right away, oh, I'm trying to make someone happy over here, or I'm trying to do this over there. And it gets you really clear about why you're choosing what you're choosing.
I think that that idea of trusting ourselves is the biggest journey that we make in our next chapters, and
Hmm.
because I really do believe that we know what it is that we want. We've got those
Yes.
desires; they're there. It's just whether or not we have the courage, in some ways, to break through the conditioning, in lots of
Hmm.
ways, as to whether or not we can actually embrace the thing that we want to do. And it's what I see often with women who are stepping into their next chapters. It's almost like, do I dare? Could I actually do
Yes.
that? Is it okay? And it's that idea of moving into the stage where you can give yourself permission, and not necessarily not tying. I love that idea of not having the expectation of what the outcome has to look like. Well, it's got to work out like this because that's what everyone says, or that's what a business is supposed to look like, etc. And
Yep.
breaking out of that mold can be really freaking hard when we've been conditioned for so long.
Yes, yes. And in fact, I think the most amazing things that have happened in my life never have come in the package I think it will, ever. And it's that first moment of shock going, oh, shoot, how's this going to turn out? And just trust the process, like keep sticking with it, and amazing things show up.
And do you think for us to be able to, let's say, build up that trust muscle, that trust in ourselves, so one part of it is letting go of the outcome, of the expectation attached to it, just putting in, because I really believe we're all doing the best we can at any given time.
Yes.
We do the best we can with what we have now, and when we know different, we do different. I think it was a quote there
Yes.
by Maya Angelou, sort of like got into my words there. But that building up your trust muscles to actually take that step. How do we do that for ourselves? If think of someone who's listening to us right now and going, well, that's all very well, but it's
Yeah.
it's hard for me. I'm scared. How do we step through that fear?
Yeah, gosh, that's such a great question, and it really, I think, starts out small. Like, I
Mm.
started noticing where even when a friend said, like, hey, where would you like to go to lunch? And it's like, oh, I don't care. Like, I would just be whatever, even though in my mind, it's like, oh, I really feel good to go here. And I
Mm.
think sometimes, especially as women, we are so agreeable. It's like, what is your opinion? What do you desire? Because if you're ignoring what you desire, it's going to be very easy to ignore your intuition. Those two things are very connected. And so it's like, what does work for you? Whether it's where you want to go to lunch, how you want to raise your kids, how you would like to run your business, the kind of movement you would like to give your body in the form of exercise or dance or whatever. But it's like tuning in and asking yourself those questions of, gosh, what really works for me? What feels good for me? What lights me up? And asking questions on the little stuff and the big stuff. Because it's just not one or the other. It's in that constant energy of, do I trust myself? Am I honoring what I truly desire? And then when you're doing that, then when the intuition speaks to you, because it's always around us, like intuition could be awareness, it can be, God, it can be universe, like whatever that, like wherever you believe that comes from or whatever that is, I believe it's all the same energy. We just have different labels and,
Yeah.
fast in it. Then that's when it starts getting louder, is because you're honoring what you desire. And it starts out small. And I see a lot of women, especially just, predominantly because that's where I work with, mostly women. So that's kind of my world. But it's always fascinating to see when women don't speak up, whether it's in their relationship with a client because they don't want to be a bitch, or, I hope that's okay to say on your
It's
show.
fine.
But we don't want to be labeled as something. And so then we're unwilling to speak up. And so it's like, if we're unwilling to speak up in those moments, there's no room for the intuition to flow. Like there's a barrier there that it can't get through.
I totally agree with that. And something that I'm hearing or hearing inside as you're talking is, I've seen that when we've asked women, so what do you want? What do you really enjoy? And sometimes we can say two or three things pretty quickly, like I love Netflix, and I love chocolate, and I love reading, and and then it starts to stop. Like the actual
Yes.
flow of what is it that I truly enjoy, that I truly desire. And I've often seen that it's because, in my opinion, we've pushed ourselves down the priority totem pole. And
Hmm.
we deserve to be up at first equal. But again, we
Yes.
may have been putting our own desires behind other people's for quite a while. And now, especially in next chapters, I mean, the women that are typically in my community are in their 40s and beyond. When the world starts to open up again, if we've had children, the children are a little older and there's more space. And now we actually need to start to fill that space with things that we want. And it can be tricky sometimes trying to work it out. So I often
Yes.
prescribe a joy folder. Come up with a joy list. Everything from, walking bare feet on a rainy day to getting diamonds from Tiffany's, and everything in between. Can be big or small. But I think this ties into what you're saying about honoring your desires, because it's so connected to your intuition. So if you start to flex the muscle of saying yes to you, then that starts to flood out into other areas of your life. And I think especially your business. I think you and I have probably heard our clients say often, so what should I do next? What's the way that I should approach that? And I think we need frameworks. You can't have, whatever. You can just do whatever, anywhere, anyhow, because then there's so many choices, your head will spin. But we've got to provide a framework for building a business. But then you have to be given the colouring in pencils to colour it any way you want.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up, because, I've been looking at this word of, coaching. Let's just look at the word coaching. Like, coaching is not telling people what to do.
No, exactly.
It is empowering people to know their own truth. And I think as a coaching industry, we've got that backwards. Is, a 6-step formula to 6 figures in 6 months. That's a joke, but there are people selling that. I sold it. Like, I get it. I was that person. I thought that's what would work. I thought I could really teach that to people, and realizing that every single person is different. So I love that, there's this framework and strategies, but for you to tune into, how do you want to build your list? Like, a perfect example of, the telesummit model. It's like, everyone should do a telesummit. You have 21, and we know the formula, 21 speakers. Every speaker has 5,000 people on their list, and everyone has to send, 2 to 3 solo emails. Like, that's the formula. And for me personally, when I look at that, when I feel the energy of that, it feels heavy. It feels
constrictive.
It just doesn't feel good. And I'm going, what? Like, and then I start asking some questions like, why does that feel good? Because I don't care if people have 5,000 people on their email list. If they have a message that's a contribution to the planet, I want to help them get that message out. That's just me. And so when you start looking at, that's the formula, though, to build your email list, and you should have 10,000 people on your email list. And I'm going, where along the lines have we bought into all these formulas of like, this is the way? And instead of asking ourselves the question of, is this my way? And I think there's that fine balance of being coachable and having the framework, and then also following our own energy. Because we can see the flip side of this too, of someone, I'm just going to follow my intuition only. But don't tell me what to do. I don't need a coach. I don't need a mentor. I don't need a mastermind. Like, I'm just going to do this. And God or the universe will tell me what to do. And there's truth in that, right? And there's no framework. There's no foundation, because you've not done it before. And so it's about, I think, in my experience, and what I, advise people to do is it's a blend of both, of having the strategies, merging them with your intuition, and be asking a lot more questions rather than just taking advice blindly, while still at the same time be coachable and be teachable.
I think it's that it's recognizing that blend. That blend is the most important part. And I know when I came out of my marketing agency back in 2012, as we were talking about the burnout, I'd been in strategy world for so long, and I was, the pendulum was way over to the left. Then when I got out of there, I was like, oh my God, freedom, and the pendulum went whooshka way over to the right, and all I wanted to explore was spirituality and self-worth and all of those things. And now, what are we, 5 years later, it has come back to the middle, and I honor the fact that there is that blend between the two. And it's such an individual recipe. I was at a networking event a couple of weeks ago, and there was a gorgeous woman there that I worked with a wee while ago, and she had this beautiful idea, and it's now 3 years later come to full fruition. She launched just a little while ago, and we were talking, one of the topics that came up was, I should have got there quicker. I should have done this quicker. And it was like, no. And then we had that whole discussion about, why do we do that to ourselves? Like, I should have, and the timetable was here. I mean, those are those self-imposed deadlines. That's that idea of you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. And it can feel frustrating sometimes that things aren't happening, inverted commas, quicker. But then it's quicker compared to what?
Right. Exactly.
Quicker compared to what? That's the one that I feel. So, you really trust that ease and flow now rather than pushing to get results. So that's the space that you're in now. Is that right?
It is, and it's so funny because in the last week I've had a few hiccups, with things. And I talked to a friend this morning, so I'll just be transparent about this, of going, I know that it always works out. it's never not worked out. And when these hiccups happen, nothing major, but it was enough to go, oh, I need to push. And it was like, wait a second. Wait, what is actually going to create more here? Because I know how to create results through pushing that boulder up the mountain and like making things happen. And the payoff for that is exhaustion, burnout, and physical fatigue.
Yeah.
And as I'm still, healing my adrenals from the fatigue from years ago, like those are some tender places of like, I've got to give that some extra love and attention and nurturing, because it can go to burnout pretty quickly. And so it was just so fascinating. Like, we're having this conversation. It's kind of been the theme so far this week of going, oh, the temptation is to go back into that push mode because I know I can make things happen. But what's the lie about that is I can't do that forever.
Yeah, it's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that, I mean, there are times within our businesses and our lives where we have to push through, where we need to hustle more. Like, I'm in the midst at the moment, as I mentioned, we're moving house next Tuesday.
Yes.
We've been here almost 23 years. There's a lot going down. And so I have to push at the moment because there is a hard deadline that is looming. But I can also be very, very aware of the impact that that's having on me. So I went and saw my naturopath last week, and I'm trying to do some things that balance the push. So we know sometimes we do need to push, but as we've both experienced, and I have no doubt people listening have as well, it isn't sustainable. So if that's the model that you're in, if that's what your business demands, then I think I don't want to move into judgment. It's a bit tricky. I don't want to judge someone and say, well, you're doing things the wrong way. It's not that. Right. It's more about stepping back and pausing and going, is this really possible for me to continue this long term? I mean, I can see in 2 weeks, the boxes will be unpacked. I've got a very clear vision. The boxes will be unpacked. I'll be out on the balcony with something nice to drink, looking at the view and going, I got there. And I'll need to take the time to rest. So it's that trusting that. I love how you said, I'm used to pushing to make things happen, but I know where that leads. So it's not sustainable long term. So then you move back into ease and flow. So what does that look like for you?
For me, it looks like asking a lot of questions and really following what I call following the lightness of what feels heavy, what feels light. Because when we really tune into everything is energy, energy is everything. Like, we get this. And when I can let go of my points of view and my conclusions of how I think things should be, and all those attachments, and really look at what is the core desire? How do I want to feel? What do I want to experience? Like, I keep going back to that. Yeah. And then asking the questions of, like, whether it's, like I'm hosting an event at the end of next month. It's, 100 to 200 people. Like, it's not a small event. And it is crunch time. So I get that energy of like, this is push time for me. And you know what? I have the entire month of May where the only thing I have planned is a weekend getaway with my husband. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no, it's rest time because I know the way my energy flows. And so ease and flow looks like, what is that target? What do you really desire? And what am I committed to? Because there is commitment here. And I think sometimes, when people have gone through burnout, I know for me, I was afraid to commit to something because I was so afraid of pushing myself again to the point of burnout that I was very resistant to structure. I was very resistant to strategies because I thought, no, I can't do that again. It's not physically, it's impossible. I will not do that to myself again. And so it's a balance there, but asking a lot of questions and just keep following the energy. Everything from marketing to what your body would like to eat, to, what time of year you'd like to take a vacation. Everything, when you tune into the energy instead of, well, this is the logical time to do it. And the other thing that I notice is when you start looking outside of yourself for a lot of answers. For example, what should I price my program? Or what date should I have my event? And it's there's a right way. And if you don't get it right, then you're doing it wrong. And so my clients, and I can feel the frustration because they want me to just tell them what to do. It's well, look at the calendar. What feels like the most expansive date? When would your event like to be? Asking the energy and some of these kind of woo crazy questions. But it's that's how the magic is created, is by asking questions and really tuning to the energy and the consciousness of everything. It's not just all on your shoulders.
No, I love that. And it's true. If we do it, if we actually do allow ourselves to pause and get quiet, because, I mean, the intuition finds it very hard to find a way through when there's so much noise and busyness and franticness happening in our lives. But again, I do default back to that idea that we've got those answers inside. This is a great girlfriend of mine down in Melbourne, which is a city here in Australia, who talks about don't listen to the sage on stage, ask the guide inside. And I think that's a beautiful, isn't it beautiful? It's just, her name's Carolyn Tate. She's a gorgeous friend with a lot of wisdom. And that really, I know that if we're talking about, self-awareness here, I have definitely defaulted in the past to, there must be a right way of doing it. And when I have a thought or an idea, it's like, okay, I'll Google that and I'll find out how to do it. And immediately go into the outside source. And what I've been trying very hard to do lately is to hit the pause button and go, okay, how does that feel? Now, if you were to bring that to life, how might you do that? And actually Google inside instead of Googling outside.
Yes.
It's a hard habit to break when there is so much noise and so much information out there, and we can have that assumption that somebody else knows it better than me.
Well, and I think the other piece too, I don't know what your experience was, but I know that I invested, over $250,000 over about 7 years in coaches, events, and programs. I mean, I have invested very heavily in my personal development, my business, and that's not including like paying myself or paying staff. Like that's just for coaches, programs, events, and consulting. And there's that moment of going, oh my gosh, like I just paid $30,000 for the lesson that I actually know best for me. Oh, that was not what I thought that knowing would come from. I thought I would get this magic pill or this thing that would make the difference in my business. And doing that time after time, I now invest very differently. And so it's things like that where it's like it can make so much sense, but we're so attached to, well, I paid all this money, so it better work. Yeah. It should work. It needs to work because, wow, I don't want to say that was a waste, but we always learn something that's way more priceless than the $10,000 program or whatever it is, whether it's $100 to $30,000, whatever.
Oh my goodness, you're making me laugh because I'm thinking back to, I haven't invested to the same level as you, but I've certainly invested. I'm a big believer in investing to support myself, but that can look different. Sometimes it's with coaches, sometimes it's with therapists or health practitioners, or I'm really looking forward to going to Canada later this year and going to a retreat with someone whose work I really admire. So I'm very happy to invest in myself, but it's the same thing. How does that feel? And I cannot wait for the Canadian experience. But I was remembering some coaching that I had. This is going way, way, way back. And I spent 6 months with this lovely lady who had so much wisdom, and it was fabulous. But we got to the end of the coaching when we were actually redesigning my marketing agency. And I got to the end of it and went, I don't want to do it. Like that's the realization I had. We'd spent the 6 months deciding how it was going to look in 2013. And I went like, epiphany, I just can't do this anymore. Took me a little bit longer to let go of it. But so it was you could say, if you looked at it from one angle, you could say that was a really expensive exercise to do nothing. But I prefer now to look at it and go, that was the most valuable investment I made because it gave me the key to unlock the door to what I really see as being far more in alignment now. But it's but yeah, at the time it was a bit tricky.
It can be a sobering moment though. I get it.
It definitely was. So these questions that you're talking about for us to ask ourselves, is that what you refer to as expansive questions?
Yes. So I study a body of work called Access Consciousness. I'll be actually certified in this body of work in August. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. But asking questions comes from, it comes from a lot of different philosophies, not just Access Consciousness. The first time I really started playing with questions was when I read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks.
Oh, great book.
And he talks about in this like, I wonder if, or I wonder how, or I wonder when. And so when you ask a question like, I wonder, then that will start activating your intuition. Because when you're making conclusions and agendas and strategies, and here's the plan, there's no room to receive any information. It's just like, well, this is the plan. We're going to do it. And you just commit and you go for it. And so when you ask a question, for example, let's just say, so here's a question that I've been asking, and it's been really fascinating to see how this has shown up because the universe always responds. So the question I was asking is, what energy, space, and consciousness can I be to be invited to share my message with thousands of people every month? And these questions, your brain will want to answer them. But it's an energy. You're invoking an energy. It's like you're activating your energy field of going, okay, universe, like, how can this show up? And so I just ask the question, kind of forget about it. Ask the question, kind of forget about it. And so within a couple weeks of asking the question, someone contacted me, and I actually just did the first show today on a podcast. The network has 1 million listeners a month. So that showed up. I think shortly after, person who connected us introduced us. And then all these people, probably like a handful, right? But in just the last couple of months, oh, I've got a podcast, or, oh, will you speak at my event? And all these things are just showing up, and I'm not chasing anything. I'm not inviting myself to anything, but it's happening on my behalf because I'm open to the energy. So asking the question does a couple things. It activates your energy field to let the universe know, like, okay, I'm ready and willing to receive this. The other thing is my intuition speaks to me much more clearly where there's space, and asking questions creates space. And so if I were to say, how, like, gosh, what would it take? I wonder how fun I could have, or how much fun I could have being invited to share my message with thousands of people every month. And it's like, oh, there's a lightness, there's a playfulness. It's like, curiosity there. Versus, okay, I've got to build my list of 10,000 people, and I've got to get in front of this many people so I can sell this. Like, you feel the energy difference, and I was a little exaggerated. But that's what we do, is we make this agenda and this plan and this strategy and a marketing plan, and it's like, hustle to make it happen. Or what if we started asking questions and then allowed our intuition to speak to us, and we followed that energy, and then we make the plan, because that plan is then going to be in alignment with where the energy is, rather than you kind of dictating what's possible. Because when I ask questions, what's fascinating is the universe has a much bigger picture for my life than I have in my head.
Than you could ever actually imagine yourself.
Yeah.
I think that I love the feeling of that. If we're talking about feelings in general, that just feels so much more delicious, I think, is the word that keeps coming up to me as I hear you. And I think there's one piece that deserves talking about here, is that there is often a gap between when we ask the question and we open the door to the universe, to our own knowing, etc., and when something shows up. And it's learning to be comfortable in that gap, because I think we get stuck in the instant gratification, like, I'll Google that, look, there's 60,000 answers immediately, I'll pick one of those, versus the more slow sort of unveiling or unraveling of possibility. And I think that's without getting too sexist here, it's a beautifully feminine thing. Like, we can unroll, we can unfurl, we have that more languorous sort of feel to things. And that's the definite feeling I'm getting as you speak. So getting comfortable in that gap, and I guess that's where we've got to let go of the expectations, and we've just got to tune up our awareness and listen to what our bodies and what the world is telling us. How did you get used to being in the gap?
Oh goodness, there's some days I'm not, because I move very fast. I always have, like, when I make up my mind for something, I make change happen. So perfect example is when I burned my business down. Literally within 48 hours, my business was done. Yep. And people ask, like, what, like, how did that happen? I'm like, you just pick up the phone and you let your clients know you're not doing it anymore. You just let your coach know, like, yeah, this isn't working, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, you just do it. And so I move very fast. So I'm not the most comfortable person being in the gap. But here's what I do when I'm in the discomfort of being in the gap, knowing that it will show up, is I keep trusting. Like, when I look back at everything in my life, is when have I ever not, like, had something show up? It may not look the way I think it does. It may not be in the time frame I think it does, but it always shows up, and it shows up better than this picture in my head when I let it go and when I surrender. And so the other piece that I tell people is, like, when you are in the gap, when it's like, okay, you're waiting for something to show up, is keep creating, keep living your life. Like, if you were just, sitting there waiting for it to show up and getting mad and judgmental about you and your ability and the universe, oh, see, there's something wrong with me. What's the problem to fix? Instead of asking more questions, like, what else is possible here? What can I do today to speed this along? Rather than, what's wrong with me? Why isn't this working out? Like, those are statements and judgments with a question mark at the end. They're not real questions.
That's a good point.
So to ask a true question is asking it from curiosity. And especially when things aren't going so well, it's, one of the questions I love is, what's right about this that I'm not getting?
Oh, I love that question. That's a fabulous one.
Yeah, what's right about this that I'm not getting? And what would it take for me to let go of all my attachments and have this work out better than I ever could have imagined? And it's like, even as I say that, I just feel this like, because again, what happens is when we ask the questions, we create space. And we can get into like the quantum physics of all this, but just you can feel that feeling of like there's space. Well, money, miracles, clients, opportunities can only be received where there's space. And so when we can start creating space and this energy flow, then we know like that intuition is much more clear, much more loud. Like, oh, here's the next step. And then the other piece that I recommend is when you're in that gap, or you're wondering if your intuition is just maybe crazy and it's not real. Follow the guidance. I remember one time I had this awareness one day of like, I would like to have a sponsor at my event who talks about money, but with a spiritual twist, even about money. I thought, I wonder who that can be. Started asking some questions around it. And my intuition, I got this hit. You should post that you're looking for this person in this particular Facebook group. I'm like, that's stupid. Like, I'm not even in it. It's going to feel weird and people are going to think I'm trying to sell something. And I talked myself out of it. The prompting came again. So I post very reluctantly, and within 60 minutes, I had someone who I knew reply. We were on the phone, and she paid for a sponsorship because she happened to be in the group at that time.
Listen for the promptings.
Yes, and so it's like listen and then act, because when you build that trust muscle, then you can trust your intuition, and it just starts out small, and then it gets into the bigger pieces too. So just start where you are and keep trusting yourself.
That's beautiful advice, and I know that we've talked about let's not have here's the steps to take, this is exactly how it's supposed to work, but overall the framework really is to get curious, to get open, to let go, then to ask the question, to listen for the answer, to trust it's going to happen, and then trust it when it arrives, and then take action, take inspired action.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would add another level to that is just follow your desires. Like really like that question you asked earlier of like, what do you want? What do you desire? What lights you up? If you don't know the answer to that, spend some time getting to know yourself. Let go of all those points of view and all the restrictions of, well, this is what it means to be successful, or this is what your business should look like, or this is what a woman should do, or this is what a mom should do. It's like, oh, that feels so heavy, and like there's so much pressure to deliver all that stuff. And it's just, wow, how do I want to feel every day? What would really light me up? Like, what do I want to experience in my life? And especially for anyone who, like, you've been in that mode of, I want to have a $5,000 a month consistently, or 10,000, like whatever that number is. And especially when you're setting these hard goals and they're not happening, let it go and ask, what do I want to feel? How do I want to experience my life and my business? And when I have clients who do this, because I was, the numbers person, like making, stuff happen that way. When I let that go, guess what happened? I made more money than this, this dollar figure that I had made so significant, because I was following the feeling. I was following my own energy and trusting myself. And
letting go of how things are supposed to be, to make space for how things could be. It's just, and it does, the whole thing, it just feels so much better. And, as we're coming full circle on the conversation, it reminds me, late last year, I had this classic experience of what it is that you're talking about. At the core of my business are masterminds. I love bringing small groups of women together in that supportive environment where, we can build the dreams. There is strategy, but there is emotional support and connection and all sorts of things. But I had a bit of a rough year last year with things that were happening with my family, and I didn't get to do the things I, inverted commas, should do to fill masterminds. All the launch stuff and all the stuff, the 6 steps to madness type thing. I had to let them go, and I did some of the things that felt right, but there was niggling away in my head. Oh, you've not done enough. You've not done this. You've not done that. But they all filled. It just happened. It happened. And that experience, as you said, look back and you can find things in your life that have always worked out. That trust, that built my trust at that moment exponentially. Now, I'm not going to tie an expectation to that everything will always work out exactly as I wanted, because that's too much pressure to put on anyone or anything. But it allowed me to build that trust muscle that if you let go, the right things will happen if the right intention is there. That's how it felt to me. And it was like, I could exhale. That's how it felt. And that's what I think our whole conversation, what I'm hoping the impact that it has on our listeners is to exhale. It's okay. You can do things your way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you can do things your way. Follow your intuition, be coachable and teachable at the same time.
Yes.
And just know it's just a choice. Like nothing is permanent. It really isn't. Like energy keeps going. And so I think sometimes we put so much pressure to make the perfect decision. There's no such thing. It's what is working for you now. It may not work for you a month from now, and be willing to flow with that energy.
Yes.
And be consistent in your desires. Be persistent and consistent. But there is a balance and a flow there.
Oh, Angella, kindred spirit, it has been sensational having this conversation with you. I dare say we could continue it for days.
Yes.
But for our listeners who want to come and find out more about the beautiful work you do, the intuitive marketing, the soul message archetypes, the courage to say yes, the different types of work that you do, where do we find you in the world?
Yes, you can go to my website, angellajohnson.com, and it's Angela with a double L. So Angela and Angela, so angellajohnson.com. But that's the best way to find me. And, when you take the Soul Message Archetype quiz, you'll get a link to join a Facebook group and just be in this conversation of how to ask questions, how to honor your energy, and create the strategies that really work for you and your business.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for the time you spent with me this morning.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And for you who's listening to this conversation right now, do as I just suggested, exhale. Take that moment to realize that there is no magic formula. You can design your business and your life based on how you most want to feel. And that idea of just staying open to the flow and the change, what happens today, that's right today, may be different next month, next year. And that's okay, because in your next chapter, you are creating the business and life that you've always wanted to. Now, that's going to look different for every single person, but take the pressure off yourself. Get curious, ask those questions, and then listen, give space and listen to those answers. Because I deeply believe that the thing that you desire also desires you. So let's open up to it. So thank you for spending your time listening to this podcast. It's always appreciated. And until next time, this is Angella Rasper saying, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again really soon. Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelaraspers.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can also enjoy valuable free resources, including show notes and downloads, along with the Next Chapter community, where you can connect with other wholehearted women on the same journey as you. We'd love to welcome and support you as your next chapter unfolds. See you next time.